Hurricane Gert is strengthening in the Atlantic Basin. I'm Mike Naso from the Tropical Update page here on YouTube with the latest on the Atlantic tropics, which are getting more active. We have several features to speak of. On the left side of the screen is Hurricane Gert, which you could see is strengthening there between Bermuda and Cape Hatteras. That front that's moving through is going to take Gert and push her away, so we won't have to deal with it. However, we have an invest, which is 91L, which is looking a little bit better organized this morning. It's not going to organize anytime quickly. There's a lot of dry air out there. However, computer models do move it west towards the Caribbean Sea. Behind it, we have another system which is likely to become another invest shortly, and that one could also be a significant tropical cyclone down the line. And then over Africa, the flooding rains have been horrible. We actually have a huge tropical wave which is forecast to move out, and this system could be a long tracker down the road, even for areas and land masses to the west. So we're going to touch on some of these features as hurricane season continues here in the Atlantic Basin. But we'll start with Gert, obviously, since it's the strongest feature out there. Hurricane Gert, as of 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, was at 32.8 north, 72.0 west. Winds were 75 miles per hour, gusting to 90. It's moving north-northeast at about 10 or 11 miles an hour, and that's anticipated to become more east-northeast, and then eventually straight northeast out to sea by the weekend. 986 millibars with the pressure. The track is in pretty good agreement here that Gert is going to remain away from Bermuda and away from the United States. You can see none of the forecast models bring it near Bermuda or even the Canadian Maritimes. We would have to deal with it maybe way up in the North Atlantic as a gale center later on in the forecast period. But as of right now, track-wise, Gert is not expected to impact land, which is great news. As the sun came up, the visible satellite clearly shows a strengthening hurricane with the convection beginning to wrap around what looks to be an eye-type feature there. So we'll wait and see just how strong this gets. Could get high-end Category 1, maybe even a Category 2, but definitely a hurricane. You can see a little bit of wind shear here coming on in from the troughiness off to its north, and that will impede it from significantly strengthening at least through the next 24 hours or so, and by then it should be moving up and out. Sometimes these trough interactions actually make systems strengthen, so we'll see if that happens with Gert. Now you can see that shear, as I mentioned, on off towards the north of Gert is what's been keeping it in check a little bit, but it is right on the edge of very favorable wind shear to the south and very unfavorable wind shear with the approaching trough to the north. So as it accelerates, we could get a little bit of intensification, but certainly nothing in the form of a major hurricane, it doesn't look like. In the central Atlantic, much more favorable conditions down here off the coast of Africa, which is why systems like our Invest 91L will probably be organizing. Now, as we take a look at our Invest, the track forecast seems pretty straightforward, generally off to the west. We were seeing some indications in earlier forecasts of it moving north of the islands, but that seems to happen a lot lately, to where the models are way too fast to turn these things, and the ridging is always much stronger and the systems are always much weaker, which means they generally stay more in the low-level flow towards the west. You can see some of these track forecasts keep this thing way down into Belize, which is very far south considering it's still all the way out there, which should be an indicator of exactly how strong and dominant that ridging is. You can see low-level convergence and upper-level divergence are playing a role, both increasing over Invest 91L out here, and you can see that is the divergence, and then as we move on, you can see the convergence there, as we see continued increases right over the top of our system. Of course, our Hurricane Gert up to the north showing increased convergence, obviously, as well. Now, the H-Worth model does make Invest 91L a significant hurricane in the Caribbean Sea. In fact, it makes it a major hurricane just south of Haiti. And you can see it doesn't really get organized until it starts to go through the islands. And this would be in the next, say, 72 hours. And then by 5 days, it is south of Haiti as a strengthening Category 3 hurricane. In fact, some of the models showed it even as a Category 4 or 5 in the Caribbean. That is to be taken with a grain of salt. We don't even have a depression yet. However, this is indicative of a more favorable environment for intensification in the Caribbean Sea, as we saw with Hurricane Franklin just a couple of days ago. Now, the GFS model, and again, thanks to our buddy Levi over at Tropical Tidbits for this map, you can see we start with Hurricane Gert here. This is the 06Z GFS. You can see Hurricane Gert sitting here off North Carolina. We have Invest 91L, the system behind it, and then the wave that's going to leave Africa. And you can see what happens with them over the coming days. Gert moves on off towards the north and then the northeast. Our system approaches the Caribbean, becoming a tropical cyclone there. And then behind it we have our second system, then the big wave off Africa, and you can see in the longer term they generally move towards the west-northwest. And at the end there, our system that is leaving Africa becomes a monster hurricane off the east coast. Now the 0Z GFS had it impacting the east coast of Florida. So this one has it turning out, but nevertheless it is an indicator that things are about to get busier in the Atlantic tropics. So as we watch Hurricane Gert move out and our two systems in the central Atlantic, we will keep a close eye on things. Right now, Gert is not a threat to land masses, thankfully, but it is getting better organized, and our systems out in the central Atlantic could be a problem down the road, potentially a real problem if some of them get going. So we're going to keep an eye. I'm Mike Naso. I'll talk to you guys next time.